Hello everybody and welcome to Purgatory Ironworks. I am your host Trenton, and today I'm going to help you get started figuring out how to cut your metal. Now it's amazing, for as many YouTube blacksmiths as there are now and as many books as I've seen on the subject, I don't think enough time is spent discussing your options to cut metal. Because as a beginner, one of the most difficult things to get done is to get stock cut to size. Most of the time what happens, especially if you're a starting knife maker, you run out, you go get yourself a leaf spring that's 3 inches across and half an inch thick. You're like, yeah, I'm going to make a knife. And then you spend the next 3 days trying to convert that into something that's of the appropriate size to make a knife out of. Even if you start doing architectural work and really the true hardware work, you need to cut stock. If you buy some half-inch square and you need to make S-hooks, well, you need to cut it into 10-inch sections. It's very difficult to do a lot of good production work, consistent production work, if you have to work it from a long bar. If you're working an S-hook out of a 3-foot bar and you have to cut it, there's going to be some severe variation in each cut. It's just the way it is. If you want consistent work, you have to take your stock and cut it consistently. But that's a bit of a problem. Steel is tough stuff, and for the beginner, your options are somewhat limited. So I want to take a moment to go over some of the options that are available to you as the beginner and give you the pros and cons. For most of us, this is where we start, because for those of you that are not necessarily craft oriented, if you want to cut a piece of metal, you have to have a hacksaw. And I'm going to tell you that even I was there in the day as a young man cutting through half-inch steel with my hacksaw, chicka, chicka, chicka. Many times the blade bound and broke, and so I'd have to have a pack of blades, and it took forever to cut even something as thin as half-inch stock. It was not a great solution, however, it will work. And my God, if you didn't have a vise to lock your stock in, you could hang it up. It was a comedy of errors. But you can go down to your local store, buy a hacksaw for 10, 15 bucks and buy some replacement blades, and it will work. The problem is, hacksaws take a little bit of skill to use. You can bind the blade, break it very easily, especially when you're working on steel like this. So it will work, but you're going to end up spending money on blades. You're going to beat up your knuckles, and you're generally going to have a lot of frustration. So it works, but it's not a great solution. Now, one of the reasons that I always talk about deciding what you're going to make so you can figure out what stock you're going to buy, if you carefully purchase your stock and make sure that it's something that you can cut easily, you're going to be way ahead. And this isn't my first option. If I had to choose one thing that wasn't super expensive, it would be this. Good old bolt cutters, a big set, may run you 30 bucks. This guy will open up to about 3/4 of an inch. Now, you're not going to be cutting 3/4 of an inch stock with this. However, if you get a big enough pair, half-inch is doable, but more specifically 3/8 and 1/4 inch is doable. And if you're just a beginning smith and you're looking at getting hardware, this is where you want to be. It's fast, it's effective, and it's not going to cause a problem. You're not going to break blades, you're not going to break this, and you're able to effectively cut small pieces of steel that you can work with. If you're starting smith, 1/4 inch round, the 1/2 inch by 3/16 bar that we talked about, that we were making our barbecue forks out of, all of that is in the range of this guy, and this can be gotten at any hardware store. It's a really good option. Now, when you get ready to get up into the big leagues, you're going to get something like this. This is a 3.5 inch grinder, and it has what is known as a zip wheel on here. Now, here's the thing, and I'd like to share a bit of philosophy with you. The more power you have access to, the more ability you have to make sure that you don't have any children in the future. If you can manage to injure your nethers with this, you are impressive. You should win the Darwin Award, because even though you can certainly scrape up a knuckle, you can't really hurt yourself with this. This guy only opens up to 3/4 of an inch. So if you could somehow get your member in that opening, you probably don't want to be alive anyway, so you should be good. Now, when you move up to one of these bad boys, there's not a welder or a fabricator out there that hasn't had a close encounter of the nether region kind with one of these bad boys. These guys, because they're an abrasive wheel, can saw through 1-inch steel relatively easily. However, these things are dangerous. Eyeglasses, usually not enough. You need face shield protection. These blades are very thin, and that's what allows them to cut so quickly. But if you get it off a little bit while it's inside the cut, it will crack, and these things will fly like ninja stars around the shop. Take a moment and Google zip wheel accident and look at some of the carnage that is out there. These have a nasty habit of being embedded into people's faces. So it's dangerous, but it's a useful tool. So as a beginner, you really need to have somebody there that knows what the heck that they're doing, but getting into power tools is the only way to do a lot of these cuts effectively. So you have to be very careful. Now, your 3.5-inch, 4-inch grinder, a good one, is going to run you $70, $80, and they are a useful thing to have. If you're going to be doing any type of blacksmith work and in conjunction with a welder or knife making, that hand grinder is going to be one of your most effective tools. Again, it is a power tool, and it has the power to eradicate your lineage if you're not careful. So that's the trade-off. You have to educate yourself and be very willing to understand how dangerous these tools are. Now, beyond that hand grinder, that's when you start getting into the professional side of things. I myself started with a horizontal bandsaw. This is instead of a bandsaw, if you're familiar with a woodworking bandsaw, that the blade is vertical. This bandsaw actually does this number, and it's used in the metalworking industry to cut heavy steels. They are available from Grizzly Industrial. Several different places have them. Jet, they're standard. But a cheap one is going to be $500 or $600, which is going to put it beyond the range of most shops. Now, in my shop, the main tool that I have is an Evolution metal cutting saw. This is basically a chop saw. It looks like a wooden chop saw, except it has carbide teeth and a lower RPM. I can very effectively cut through 1-inch square bar. But again, these tools are $400 and $500 a piece. They're a professional grade, and they make a tremendous difference. In my shop, there is no way I would be able to produce anything in any reasonable amount of time if I did not have the professional tools that I do. One other thing that I want to address is there's outside of having somebody tell me what a great knife or railroad spike makes. The other thing that irks me more than anything else is having a young smith, a beginner smith, tell me that they don't use the correct tool because they want to do it the old way. I've heard this so many times, and it goes like this. Now, when I'm walking around a festival or whatnot, I don't have a giant sign saying I'm Trent Ty, I'm a blacksmith, blah, blah, blah. But of course, I gravitate to whatever smith is working there, and I sit quietly and observe. Like I said, if you don't know that, yeah, those sharks are out there, right? But a lot of time, a young smith who doesn't have the right tooling, when I've asked them, hey, you can use this particular tool and it's way better, I've had them rather arrogantly state that, no, I do it the old way. I'm too good to use a modern tool. And outside of the railroad spike issue, there is nothing more that makes me want to punch them right in the mouth than hearing, I do it the old way, and that's why I'm doing it stupid. Ugh, it's rough. And it's hard not to be ugly to these guys because usually that statement's not coming from a point of education or principle. It's usually an excuse given on why they don't have the right stuff. Okay? Now, again, let me show you. And I want to make a point here. If you've ever used that excuse, that has ever come out of your mouth, let me explain to you why, from an experienced smith's point of view, that is absolute bunk. Let's say the year's 1800, and you only do it the old way. So if you're going to cut metal, you're going to use a cutting hardy or you're going to use a hot cut. That's the only two ways you're going to cut metal because you do it the old way. If you were in a production shop in 1800, you would be fired. Why? Because for 2,000 years, blacksmiths have been intently studying how they can do it bigger, better, and faster. And that meant that you had to get away from handwork. When this country was being colonized, trade goods were a big thing. Things to trade with the local natives were a huge commodity. One of the most treasured commodities were what came to be termed as scalping knives, metal knives. Because the natives did not have iron or steel, a knife was a huge asset. So these knives came over from England and Europe by the hundreds of thousands. Now the question is, how did they make so many damn knives by hand? Well, they did grind them, but what they were doing is they were using giant machines to roll out thin plates of carbon steel, and then they had machines big enough that were stamping out blades around 1750. Let me say that again. There was machinery in England and Europe that was so large it could stamp plate. So if you're doing it the old way and it's 1800 and you're saying, I'm only going to use a hot cut, I'm only going to use a hot set, you'd be laughed right out of the blacksmith shop. Simple fact is that blacksmiths have learned how to do it better, faster, and more efficiently. Now, you're not always going to have access to that equipment, but it should always be in your mind. If I'm in the shop and the power's out, everything else is down, and I don't have a way to cut metal, and I have to use this, I will use this very effectively. But the whole time I'm using it, I'm going, this sucks, I need something better. And then that's okay. If you're a starting smith and you're using what you've got, bless you, my child. There's no problem with that. But you always need to be aware that there is a better tool, and if you're going to be a better smith, you have got to set course for that better tool. And if you do that, you will set course for better work and being a better blacksmith.